to Peter and Enzo.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Regula. Thanks for having us. Great pleasure being here. Thanks a lot for all the attendees. Let us jump in. I think some of you might know the background of ANYbotics. We are a deep tech company, so this topic coming from research to market is core of our strategy, has been core to our heart. So we're very happy to see about the interest and dive deeper on this topic today with me as Enzo, our Chief Commercial Officer. But let me quickly get started on who's actually speaking to you today. What's our background? I think that can help a little bit in understanding our thinking and then also for the Q&A. I'll go ahead with myself. I had the pleasure to study mechanical engineering at ETH Zurich and very quickly fell in love with robotics, from drones to robots that could balance in a ball, where we saw first public interest, then worked for quite a time on humanoids abroad in the US at MIT, etc., and then came back to ETH Zurich to follow up with a PhD in robotics. And this was also the starting point of us building four-legged robots. You see here the picture in the center with some of the co-founders of ANYbotics. Meanwhile, we're at 150 people plus, and over the time I had the pleasure to walk through different positions and now leading the company as CEO.
Also from my side, big welcome to today's webinar. Give a quick update who I am, and then I'm handing back to Peter. So I have a background in business. I studied at the University of St. Gallen, both international management and accounting and finance. Did already my first entrepreneurial activities back then. We founded an industrial club that was quite new for HSG at the time, which was mostly banking and consulting. I then did start a corporate career after university. The picture here, you know, with the tie in Sulzer, I was in the corporate development team, spent there about 5 years, and then really wanted to go out and meet the customer. I was always very much interested in talking to the clients. So I joined Hilti as a sales rep. You have a picture of my sales team that I took over after a year, basically driving around in the country, meeting customers on the construction side, opening the trunk and showing them how to drill a hole with the best tool in the world. And that experience from those 10 years of corporate is what then brought me to ANYbotics, taking over all the commercial activities. So all the sales, marketing, customer success functions. I've joined ANYbotics 2.5 years ago, and since then have been growing the whole commercial activities from roughly 4 or 5 people to about 40 to some 50 people in the commercial division.
Awesome. Now let us take you a little bit on the journey of ANYbotics. What do we actually do? Now at ANYbotics, our vision is to create a workforce of autonomous robots. And this is because we believe, and have the high conviction, that companies in the future will not only hire people, but they will hire robots to get the job done. We have seen this in manufacturing with robotic arms, in warehousing with the Amazons and those UGVs. And now we see it also in the heavy industries that so far could not profit from robotics. But now with the availability of robots that can maneuver wherever people can go, climbing steps and stairs, and robots that are fully autonomous, so once you give them a task, they understand the environment, we can use these robots in a first step to collect information. You see this here in the video. It's about routine inspection of visual, thermal, acoustic data, making sure that these plants are driven safely and at the highest productivity levels. One of the main challenges these industries faces is also a demographic shift. It's very hard to find young people that want and are capable to do this. A lot of regular maintenance jobs. So the autonomous workforce of robotics helps them to mitigate those challenges and provide the existing staff that they have a tool for better information, so they can also take the decisions with a better knowledge on the plant. Now, in this concrete example, this is a chemical plant in Germany that deployed the robot for the last 18 months. They started very small with 1 robot, thermal images. And you have to imagine they did so far maintenance cycles every 2 weeks. And now with the insights from the robot, they could prolong that for a certain time. For them, it meant 350,000 euros saved annually. So you can imagine these facilities provide a large number of financial revenues. And so with a robot, you can, even if it's just a couple of percentages in productivity increase, it's a massive impact. And so Animal, our four-legged robot, is our first product. We have a second product, Animal X, specifically designed for the oil and gas and chemicals industry, where you have special safety certification requirements. Today, we work a lot on the inspection, but of course, our vision is to also go beyond that and start to interact with the environment through manipulation capabilities. But that's just as a short background on what we do at ANYbotics, and glad to take you in the next little bit on where we came from. So today we're a Swiss-based company. We have a first office in Romania and are expanding to the US as we speak. We founded 2016, and as I mentioned, over 150 people and fast growing. This is possible because we saw commercial success over the last couple of years. We're able to attract the Series A in 2020 over 20 million, and then also Series B recently in May last year over 50 million. Our team has been developing legged robots for over 14 years. It all started at ETH Zurich, where one of our co-founders built the first legged robot as his bachelor thesis. Throughout the years, we're able to attract additional governmental funding. You see some of the logos at the bottom, but for the last 3 years, are VC-backed and are on a path for exponential commercial growth. And this is also what we're going to talk about today. What you see here is actually the first legged robot at ETH Zurich that one of our co-founders built. As you see, it started all very clumsy, slow, but this is where you start. So this robot showed the concept. You could build an electrically driven four-legged robot, but it walked more like a table. Very slow, it couldn't take any steps. So not yet quite there where a vision lied. We saw from the technology perspective that 4 legs and inspired by nature provides you high agility, versatility, moving anywhere where animals or people can go. Glad to also give you a progress update on that without diving further, but AI has also revolutionized quite a bit on how we can control robots. We're not quite there yet compared to nature. However, today we have an extremely stable platform, fully certified, series manufactured, and extremely robust in reacting to, in real time, to obstacles in the environment and providing an extremely high level of autonomy. Now you can imagine when you build such a system, you think technology first. And when what happened to us, the story is that we published these videos in the days and papers, and then we got calls and emails from plant operators that said, hey, what you're doing here is very interesting. Are you selling these robots? And we scratched our head and said, why would you be interested in such a robot? And they explained us the reason that they are, as I mentioned at the beginning, they need people on site. And the drones and robots with the wheels and tracks could not really work for them. So this solution was then very interesting. As we dove deeper, we got very interested in the problem we could potentially solve with this technology and really found this is what I mentioned before, a workforce shortage, so helping the people on site. Also, the technology that is available through IoT sensors, placing sensors everywhere, provides a level of information, but you cannot place for every sensor, for every problem, you cannot place a sensor. So also mobile information gathering is here key. And lastly, safety is a big driver in the industry, removing some of the people from the constant exposure to the hazardous environment. And so with these insights, we went ahead and said, we believe that's something we can solve. Went ahead and founded ANYbotics in 2016. Now you can imagine you come very much from this technology perspective, but you have a market and a clear goal on how you want to scale that. And this is also the content of today, how we want to take you through. And we're going to focus on 3 success factors that we implemented and saw working for us. Number 1, essentially the starting point. Not only falling in love with your tech, understanding that, but then switching very quickly the mindset and understanding the problem of your customer and their daily challenges. Number 2 and 3, Enzo will talk about the focus, so centering your go-to-market efforts on early adopters, because those people have the patience and the budgets to work with you, even if it's early technology. And the number 3, this is where we're in today, scaling, how to structure a customer expansion journey in packages and how to do that very systematically. But let me hit it off with number 1, starting. When we started the company, our the most important thing that we remembered is the biggest risk when you have a handful of PhD students and engineers is that you think too much in your tech. So we proactively exposed ourselves from the very beginning, even with the very early prototypes that you see here, into our customers' shoes and really learned the in and out. So this was the founding team themselves. Actually, see here the three co-founders. Being offshore, to do that, you need to have all the offshore certification, fly out with a helicopter. So also a lot of time, effort, and costs involved. And we asked a lot of questions, right? That was all about 5 times why. So you really understand the root topics you can help and tackle. What was important is charging money essentially from the start. Now, there's a lot of people interested in trying out the robot, but you can really check for the seriousness if you charge significant sums. So for projects, multi-week projects offshore, etc., you can imagine this very quickly goes into multiple hundreds of thousands that these companies, if they're really interested, are happy to put up. And then you support them through a lot of documentation, make it extremely professional, being there, helping your champion that stood up for you, that gets you into the company and selling the project internally. This was number one for us through extremely professional documentation, showing them also, this is, while you cannot keep the robot now because it's a prototype, but here's the result, here's information, here's a vision how this technology will help you in the future. So they have a tangible outcome. The second, what worked for us is capturing great videos and photos that you give them back. You use it for your social media, but also this company often wants to position themselves as innovators, as thought leaders. And if you have a CEO of a company posting such an image, that creates a massive ripple effect throughout the industry and gives you essentially almost a free advertising and a great reputation on the market. And based on that, then glad to hand over to Enzo now on step number 2.
What Peter explained is really this very early stage of the innovators in the tech adoption cycle. When you build something revolutionary new, you'll have a few companies out there that are willing to pay to test your technology. That's the innovation or the innovator cycle, where you really want to make sure that you learn about what they need. What you then need to do is to get to the next level in that adoption cycle, which is what is called the early adopters. And there are 3 major things that we implemented very early on to take that first step into the next kind of chamber of that adoption curve, which is really focusing on the right customers that can help you scale the business and learn more and get more money and more orders in to kind of keep going. That has 3 main components. One is you need to figure out the ideal customer profiles. As Peter said, there's a lot of interest in new technologies very often. We sometimes call them the robot tourists. And so there are a lot of companies that are interested in taking a nice social media video with a robot, but those are not the companies that will have the stamina and the energy to necessarily put the investment in to really take it mainstream afterwards. So focusing clearly on who is your ideal customer, what is the prerequisites that make a customer more likely to continue working with you and partnering with you as you continue the journey, and are ready to embark on a journey knowing that the technology is not yet fully mature. That's super important, this expectation management. Then the next level is when you've identified those customers who are the most likely customers that help you scale, finding the right personas. There's a general trap that you would only focus on innovators in the beginning. So kind of the innovation team, the digitalization team, all the corporate teams that have budget to test out new technologies. And for them, mostly the result that they need to achieve is they need to file a report internally that they've tested a new innovation. And that only gets you so far. So what you need to ensure, and what we did very early on, is that as a second persona in the mix, there was always someone that came from the facility, from the plant, from the actual site where we would deploy the robot, that had a business interest to make this technology work. Even very early on, when we knew there's still a couple of years to go until the technology really delivers the value that the person on site needs. So that relationship is key. And then I think the third bucket is especially in deep tech, when you have to build hardware that is costly and takes quite a lot of time to build, there's only limited amount of supply that you can give to the market, and making sure that the customers that are most interested, they can join some sort of an early adopter program, and you can leverage those anchor customers then to go into the next phase. We created what we called an early adopter program that was very successful, created a lot of FOMO, fear of missing out in the market, and was enabled us to really get commitments from customers early on for follow-up orders, for scaling plans that then were also very important for us to go to the financial markets, VC markets, and get more, show more traction in the market. So that's kind of the focus on the early adopters. Within those early adopters, then we kind of developed a very structured approach on taking the customers through what we call a land and expand journey, that we structured it in 5 categories. I think that's very dependent on how you look at your business model. But for us, with robots and with quite a high cost of an individual equipment, it became a big difference from getting to 0 to 1. So making sure that the customer, does a POC and then buys the first robot. Then there's a different phase from getting from 1 to 10 and having first couple of additional plants using it. And then actually going into full scale mode where you get from 10 to 100 or 1,000 robots, because all those customers obviously have potential for quite a lot of robotics in their overall facilities. And that is super important that you stage that the right way, because there will be a lot of things that the company, ANYbotics in our case, needs to develop to get ready for repeatability and scale. But there's also a lot of things that the customer needs to do to get ready for those phases. And if you are not putting the energy on the right topics at the right time, you might waste some of the energy and might not close some of the relevant items that are required to take the next gate. So in the qualification stage, it's really about customers selecting you as a vendor. So you need to show problem solution fit. You need to be able to show that you're a reliable partner, that you have the relevant basic certifications, making sure that they can work with you. Then you deploy your technology, hardware or software, you roll it out, and you want to make sure that the first interaction with your technology is a positive experience, but also that you set clear success criteria of when will the customer say that was a successful deployment. Because otherwise it's going to be hard for you to challenge or to ensure that you can continue. The last phase of completing a landing experience with a customer is making sure that you can prove the value of your technology in operation. And that's really making sure it's easy to use, making sure the data, in our case, that the customer wants to extract from the robot, that really lands where it needs to land, that you have clear metrics in place, how you calculate the value, so that a customer using the robot over a certain period of time has a good picture of, yes, that is actually generating value for me. That is then also the moment when you can go into discussions with the same customers and say, okay, now that we've proven the impact on the first deployment, how do we now take that to 5 to 10 to 100 robots? And we split that again into 2 phases. One is the repeatability, where it's mostly about us getting into a phase that we can kind of scale the deployments with our customers. So are our sales processes scalable? Are our deployment processes scalable? Is the technology easy enough to use? If we deploy more robots and we have more robots out in the field, do we have a scalable after sales setup? Can we do global customer support? There's a lot of things where we as a supplier need to be ready that we can have a repeatable business. And once you achieve that, then you continue proving the value. Then the scale really becomes a question on the customer side. Is the customer organization ready to scale? Do they have master operators and their internal setup that the first 1 or 2 facilities that now have deployed your technology, they act as an internal sponsor to make sure that all the other facilities start to pull for the technology? Because it's otherwise going to be extremely difficult to push your solution throughout the whole company. That will require a lot of resources. You need to somehow manage that the company generates a pull factor that distributes and kind of scales the value across the whole organization. One very important element for that is that you have a clear picture on how does the solution really generate value for the customer. And we put a lot of effort into creating what we call a ROI playbook, which is basically means, once you develop or once you implement a solution, how will the customer very clearly assess the value generation of your solution? The more innovative your solution or your product is, the more difficult will it be for the customer to develop on himself a framework how he will assess the value generation of a new solution, because it's also very new to them. And many customers might only see half of the picture. So it's our job in that case to make sure that we complete the picture for them and we help them getting the right framework that then we can fill with their data that then completes the full calculation. You need this because without a positive return on investment on such technology, there might be a couple of deployments funded by innovation projects, but there's not going to be full-scale operational expansion. That will only happen when it's worthwhile for them to invest money, so the customer gets more money out of it. In order to understand the customer value, you can do some desk research and you can get, the first kind of thoughts around the applications. And we did that already when we talked to the innovators. But then when you really want to go into the detailed scale-up mode, it becomes super important to talk to the customers in very extensive sessions. And we did a lot of interviews, a lot of workshops, and then nailed it down or boiled it down to these 6 items you can see here on the screen. That's the relevant value drivers for ANYbotics or for our customers. And that might be very different for another solution, but it's important to put it into a very concise way that you can talk about it with the customer and then have a financial model behind that you can help the customer to actually define what the value generation in each of those buckets is. And the result is kind of a fully fledged playbook that we can now go through with customers very early in our sales process. So we talk a bit about the customer setup, and then when we know that we have a solution that could solve their problems, we can execute a value workshop, a couple of hours with them to really go through and figure out what is going to be valuable for them, and then use that to scale up the technology. Good. Maybe those are the 3 success factors. If you do all of those things right, you learn from your customers and your innovators, you strictly focus on the right customers and get first early adopters, and then you structure your customers and your land and expand journey the right way, there's a big chance that also your business will kind of scale. Here's a quick story from when I started at ANYbotics 2.5 years ago. We were just launching this second robot publicly to the market that Peter mentioned, the explosion-proof version. And we launched that in Malaysia at the Oil and Gas Fair. And obviously, in the early stage, the timelines are short, so we had to deassemble the whole robot into pieces, put it into 4 suitcases or 5 suitcases actually, and we went to Malaysia, got through the customs, had to give them some stickers so they understood what actually we brought in, a lot of metals, pulled it together, had quite a last minute session, but then we're able to really knock it off and get started. And how is it going today? We have, if we click one more time, there's kind of a little, kink in that curve of business. So we had a lot of research, a lot of early innovator business. Then when we really started focusing on early adopters, doing the program, and now getting into scale, that's when the curve starts to kink, and it's really going into the right direction at the moment. So much from us on a kind of a quick intro. I think Peter is showing here also our LinkedIn QR code. So happy to get your to follow us, either our company page and obviously us personally will sometimes share some updates on how it's going. I'm happy to jump into Q&A.
Thank you so much, Peter and Enzo. That was really, really interesting. I'd like to kick it off with a couple of questions. So, do you rent those robots? Do you sell them? How does it work?
So we do both. There's actually two different type of business models. Then customer can purchase the hardware, the CapEx investment, and he can do software as a service with all the intelligence on the robot. Might be either the robotic intelligence that you can move the robot, the autonomy, and all this, making the metal box a smart robot. And then there's a lot of inspection intelligence that the customer also can subscribe to as a SaaS package to get the value out of the data. There's also a thing what we call robot as a service, which also includes the hardware as a service in the same package. So it's basically the customer pays a monthly fee as a subscription, and he will get the hardware and the software all installed, deployed in his facility. He basically pays for the insights that he will get, kind of like you hire a coworker, having a mixed workforce, couple of people, couple of robots in your facility that deliver the data that you need.
Mm. And how does it work for the internationalization? I think, in a SaaS company, you'd probably go, oh, well, let's take this country and then we move to the next one. You obviously have a completely different approach. And I'm wondering, was there any strategy? Do you also say, okay, let's focus on countries X, Y, Z because they're more likely to afford? Or is it literally the customers that you say, okay, this is the industry, they're sitting here, any country is good for us, whether it's Nigeria or Finland or South America, how are you approaching this?
Yeah, so that it's a very good question. I think one of the main challenges if you go after global markets. So our solution, and Peter showed a picture offshore on an offshore wind park. Obviously, we don't have offshore wind here, so you need to go to the Nordics. There's huge offshore wind parks being built in Asia, and the oil and gas domain, mining industries. A lot where our solution can work. You don't have the business in Switzerland. So very, very early on, most of the business is international. So we don't, probably 99% is outside of Switzerland. And there's a lot of inbound interest. And I think one of the main challenges as a startup is to make sure that you kind of focus on certain things, especially with hardware, because whenever you ship your hardware to a new country, you need to make sure that it's certified, that you can import it. There's a lot of regulations around it, testing that can blow you up as a startup because you don't have the resources. So I think in the beginning, obviously you try to get all the business in that you can have, then land some sort of an anchor customer in a certain industry and then try to build your where to play around that. So that is what we've done. We've narrowed the focus quite strictly in the last couple of years, from basically just opportunistically selling to who actually asked the robot, to really having a clear strategy in which countries and which industries are dominant. Now focusing predominantly on Europe, Middle East, now entering the US and having a couple of resellers in some other key countries where we know there's a lot of business and a big growth in certain industries. But it requires a very strategic approach when you start to scale it, because otherwise the resources that you need to put in to scale hardware globally are quite big.
Thank you. Sounds super interesting, but also very challenging. And talking about the challenges, what were some of the major challenges that you encountered during the sort of transition from a research concept to a market-ready product? How did you address these, both technically and strategically?
Yeah, maybe I can start from a technical perspective. I think in robotics, it's often you build the first prototype, it works great, you take a video and you believe 90% of the work is done. It's actually, you have done 10%. So for us, the journey we knew, and that's one of the fallacies in building a robotics company, is don't underestimate the work that comes into industrialization, reliability. And we were quite aware of it, but still we underestimated it. So that has been one of the major challenges. How do you build something not once, not 10 times, but 200-300 robots that are identical, that are maintenance you have to design for cost. If you look at the robot concept, fundamentally, not a lot has changed, right? It's 12 motors and IMU, hard drives, etc. Like these basic setups, but the amount of work that has gone into it has been massive. And you need very different skills in the team, right? The danger of smart engineers is, yes, they can do anything but not everything, right? And not so getting in essentially people that have done not robotics but other industrialization and optimization and manufacturing processes has been fundamental for us. It was great. We were able to, number one, attract those people, onboard them, and create the mindset now throughout the company that doesn't think only robotics, but really how do we scale this solution up?
Did you want to say something as well, or? Nope.
Yeah, maybe one small addition. From a commercial side, the customers are fundamentally different. Everyone, research universities, research labs, but also the research teams at customers, their focus is delivering innovation, writing a new paper, doing something with the robot. They don't need to create value in that business value sense. They create output in terms of research and studies. That's fundamentally different when you go into actual industrial landscape. And figuring out that ROI that I talked about took us 2 years to really get to the real playbook and get all the insights in, because you iterate and you learn. That's quite a big cornerstone of a scale-up strategy then to really capture that value.
You mentioned that I think one really important thing is, it's not the innovation team. The innovation team thinks it's sexy, but it's actually the others that essentially probably approve the budget or pay the bill. How do you find these people? It must be quite hard to actually find them, the people in the plants that are responsible for that. How do you do that?
Yeah, there's multiple ways to it. I think one that we did very early is that we told the innovation teams, hey, we would also like to have someone from the actual plant in there, because it's gonna be great if we test it in your lab, but ultimately you're testing it to get a real life use case for it. So let's figure out who's going to be your early adopter site in a way. So you're an early adopter customer, who's going to be your early adopter facility that is going to adopt the technology if it's ready enough to go out, because you need your first site, and then let's bring those people in. That has been the most promising way of getting those companies or those contacts. Sometimes they just write you, because some of the and that's an interesting one. Some of the operational people, they see technology like robotics as one of the elements that they can also make their job more rich and potentially also grow within their own roles if they bring something really cool in. So they have also personal motivation, which then they find you. But I think it's basically those two things. And now it's just more structured outreach, since we know now who are the right people that we need to talk to in those companies.
I think it's important to add, the innovation groups are not evil, right? Don't avoid them. That's not what we're saying. Is use them. They're your champion. They can open the doors. But they're not your customer or your final customer that's going to pay the bill. So, but they're your sparring partner. You need to enable them with the right stories and the materials, but they need also to bring something on the table. And quite often, the innovation teams are not great, so you also educate them on what you need from them to make this successful.
All right. Talking about your work at ETH, your studies and research at ETH, how has that affected or influenced the development? I'm sure there is also lots of connections coming out of there and potentially collaborations. And Peter, I think recently I saw a picture of you, was that with someone from Japan, governmental relations, etc. Does ETH support you in this, or are you basically on your own now? So
clearly, since we founded, let's say the first 2.5 years, we were still part of ETH and part of the Wies Translation Center. So that has been an important part. But since 2019 that we moved here, we're completely independent. However, the relationship to ETH is also co-founder of the company, including multiple professors. This is very important, and we proactively maintain that. That's essentially on a research level, because ETH uses our robots. We give them, and also other universities, it's about 50 universities using our robots. We give them full access to low-level software, to the hardware. They can modify it. And so it enables them to do great research because they have a platform to work with. And for us, it's great because they're exploring the world, what else can be done. And so based on that, we can then set up collaboration projects. We hire some people from ETH, and in this early technology, foster that environment of also educating people how to build and program such robots. Apart from that, I think the relationship with ETH is also, from, I say, the political or VC perspective, important. But I wouldn't say there's a proactive support or something. This happens more now on an occasional basis. So I'm not even sure where that Japan visit came from. Certainly could be in ECH, could be also that we directly have been contacted.
Okay, interesting. I would like to ask a question from the chat. First of all, thanks for the presentation. Is ANYbotics profitable? And if yes, how is the journey from research to finally be profitable?
Yeah, we're not yet profitable. And it really depends on what's the trajectory as a company you're on. More recently, there has been a big push to push companies to gain profitability. There's always, you need to have a plan how you can reach that for your core business. Right now, robotics and the trajectory, we're seeing this, you saw the exponential growth, not only from our side, but the entire market. We see competition investing heavily. So for us is, how do we make sure that a Swiss company out of Europe, we have competition in US, we have competition in China, but make this company really successful. So this requires even more funding. Profitability is important, but right now, not priority number one. Is about how do we capture and that market share and build that market together actually with our competition as well.
Bainur, you're raising your hand. Would you like to ask a question?
I would like to ask a question. So thanks for the presentation, it was very insightful. And I have one question regarding the competition. So the field of robotics has become very, very crowded in the last few years. A lot of players going into the area. I know that you are specifically focusing with the robots that serve industrial verticals, but I would like to learn more about how are you thinking about your competition? How defensible is your product and business model against a strong competition from China, as an example, or Korea, or Japan, or from any other part of the world?
Yeah, excellent question. And that answer, I mean, the field of competition for the last couple of years was quite stale. We didn't see a lot of movement, especially companies that could provide a real solution to their customers. What we're observing recently is, and we're welcoming that, is a massive investment and trend of companies building similar technologies, be that four-legged, six-legged, humanoid robots. I think we're very well equipped to remain one of the leaders because we have a very sizable team, a lot of knowledge, great connections, and can maintain a pace of innovation. It's not that we took a technology and just commercialized it, right? So we have half of our team is R&D and creates at the forefront of robotics. So you need to maintain the speed of innovation, etc. Number two is what you mentioned is rightfully the focus. So we're not interested in just building the coolest technology, but solving our customers' problems. And once you have established that relationship and can solve the end-to-end solution, customers are not, you have to imagine, are not buying a robot. They're buying a solution to their problem, right? And this is fundamentally different. There's many, many puzzle pieces you need to have in place such that you're the best tool for those customers. Now, with that focus, we're able to build, pieces like Animal X, but large parts of our software, of our solution that are way beyond just the core robotics technology. And that is something we're maintaining. The market, although it's extremely big for robotics, even our sector that we're focused on, ultimately right now, I think it's more important to show that robotics is growing, is reliable, is safe, is solving problems, so making the cake grow before we fight against the others. We do have about 10 patents, but those are right now not intended to keep others away. It's more that you can keep the freedom to operate. What you don't want is a big company coming in and then putting patents in and then suing you. So that's from that perspective. But right now it's all about the speed, the visibility, and customer traction, so you can attract additional financings to grow the company.
Maybe one thing to add that is less from a technology and competition perspective, more from a customer approach. We have been over-investing, I would say, over proportionally investing into customer success resources. So making sure that, once you actually do find the customers and they want to work with you, we have a very big field engineering team. We have a customer support team. Even for a smaller startup at the time, we had quite a lot of resources invested into that. That pays off quite a lot once something is not going well with the customer, or even if it does go well, you can scale faster. Very tight relationships that are at times more important than kind of having maybe a competitor coming in and selling something for a little bit cheaper. That has been instrumental as well to bind customers in that early phase.
Thanks for sharing. Very insightful.
Thank you, Ben.
Talking about the development, there is various fields like interdisciplinary collaborations that you need to have, whether it's AI engineering, etc. Could you discuss this role, or do you partner with anyone? Do you do everything in-house? How do you ensure that?
Great question, and it's again one of the fallacies that engineers love to do things by themselves. Fact is, though, unfortunately, robotics is a early industry, so there's not a lot of technologies that you can plug and play. And the danger for us is to rely on technologies coming from other startups that might be significantly smaller. Do they survive? Can they deliver, or do they pivot suddenly, right? So we've been quite deliberate. This led us down to the path that we needed to do quite significant parts, the entire software and big parts of the hardware ourselves. This also gives you a competitive edge because you can fully vertically integrate it, but it comes at a higher cost. More recently, we have been able to open that up by saying, what is becoming a more of a commodity? What is it that is not unique to us? So I'll give you one example. For motors, we in the very beginning built our own motors. We had a patent on it, and we really built a high-performance robotic actuator for mobile robot or legged robots specifically. And then we partnered with Maxon, one of the leading worldwide, but it's a Swiss motor company that saw the opportunity in robotics. They were not ready to do that yet, but together in that partnership, we brought our IP, their expertise in building motors and manufacturing together to build the next generation of actuators. So with each project that you're building, you need to think about, buy or make or partnerships. With AI, very similar. We're not in the business to build foundation models, etc. Here, we'd rather work with universities, but also AI companies that can help us there. But it's also a big involvement from our side then in the partnership to invest our robotic part into it. So it doesn't come for free, partnerships. You have to be aware you need to maintain and leverage those. But yes, partnerships has been key, especially Enzo can talk about maybe the sales partnerships. That's also a key topic.
Yes, maybe to add on that, I think especially when you're going global as a company, you always have to define on how much do you want to do direct in all your end markets and how much do you want to rely on partners. And there are two kind of thinking schools of it. One is you do everything direct, but that slows you down, also requires quite a lot of investment, or you do all with partners. That reduces your exposure to the end customer because you always have an intermediary in between. That exposure to end customer is crucial for a young company because we need to know from the end user what do we need to build. So we selected early on to do most direct, but then selectively start to add the right partners. So much more quality over quantity in terms of partner selection to make sure that in certain geographies that are going to be harder for us to serve, or for certain parts of the ecosystem where we believe that our solution is only part of it, that you have the right partners together that you can serve the complete solution ultimately in all the geographic areas that you want to. But it's much more focused on quality than quantity that sometimes is seen in partnerships.
I'd like to get back on the partnership question. So having partners also means you lose control to a certain extent. And I think, Peter, this is something that's also very close to your heart, that your robots are used in the right way and not abused by anyone. How do you ensure that? How do you make sure that, I guess, especially in the current political climate, in the current situation around the world, that this is ensured? That must be quite difficult, I would assume, no?
So number one, ANYbotics, with the founding team, we have set out the clear strategy and said we're not building weaponized or military robots that are being used to harm, the environment or people or animals or something similar. So this has been at the core. With that, we have been able to set out a strategy that these days the contact from military has actually quite reduced because they don't see us now as a solution to that. The second step is know your customers. We're not just shipping robots around the world without knowing what to do. One of our core values is responsibilities and real impact. We want to be there when the robot arrives. We help them onboard. The human factor here, customer success, is very, very important. And we see our customers much more like partners, because all of them have the potential to scale to hundreds and thousands of robots. So it's way, way less transactional. It's more a really deep partnership. Then we measure the robots, we get the data, not the secret information of the confidential information of the plant, but how many steps has the robot taken, which environment, the battery cycles, things like that. So we can monitor also the usage and how they're being used. And thirdly, we have in the contractual setup clear statements on our possibilities if they're being misused outside of that scope, that we could retrieve the robots or turn them off.
Thank you. Looking into the future, what trends do you foresee in the industrial robotics section? How are you positioning yourself? And then also, second question, looking back, when you founded ANYbotics or co-founded ANYbotics, when did you realize, okay, we're now at the tipping point, I found something that really makes a difference? But first of all, looking forward and then backward.
Sure. So what I'm really excited about is the common awareness of companies that now robotics is here. 3 years ago, you would call up a company and talk about robots and they would scratch their head. The big majority, not the innovators, they would understand, but the big majority wouldn't. Nowadays, also thanks to us, but also our competition that promotes a lot on YouTube, this form factor has become very, in top of people's mind. They know that these exist, they know they can be used. So this is a very exciting topic to go into. The second, what we see is now the combination of AI and robotics allows us to build not only more performant robots to get more out of it, but also build in cheaper hardware. If you imagine at research, you're taking the best hardware you can take because you're trying to make your job easier of programming the robot. So the best sensors, the most precise metal parts, encoders, etc. And this has now been quite opened up because the robots can learn by themselves and you can significantly reduce the quality that you need. So this will enable, again, new use cases, more robot, you get into the scale manufacturing. So I believe it's really also the moment of democratization and scaling robotics in a broad perspective. The third topic in the future is that right now, as I mentioned, we're doing a lot of inspection. So passively understanding the world. This is a valuable use case. But the next step is in also being able to interact with the environment. A robot in many regards is also an embodiment of the AI, and that putting together will allow us to use AI and the intelligence of automation towards really closing the loop between the digital and physical world, because a robot can act in both ways, collect data, but also interact with the environment. And that cycle is starting to spin. I'm very, very excited about the future holds here.
What's next now? So do you have any exciting projects coming up, or features, or new product releases, a new robot? What's coming next?
Yeah, we won't be sharing, I guess, all the the secret things we're doing. That goes in a more coordinated fashion. Right now, as I mentioned in the beginning, we're expanding to the US. This is very exciting for us. As I mentioned, we have a handful of people already in Romania as the developers, but I think a more visible also market entry into the US. This is an exciting topic also in the growth of the company as we're approaching that.
Thank you. We have two questions. So Frank, you've raised your hand. Would you like to go first?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Frank. I'm the managing director and senior consultant at Edison GmbH. We offer services in areas of energy, power, and now in robotics. And my question is, you mentioned the certifications and the US market. How far you are in that sense of like having a UL certification, as an example, for US or Canadian CSA certification for your robots? And that's the first part question. And if not, but it's ongoing, would you be open to some partnership offering? We offer services of years of experience, in particular in UL certification.
That's a great point, Frank. As we discussed, internationalization in hardware comes with the challenge of certification. So the red robot animal that's already fully CE, and we have the FCC certification, so we're ready to expand globally, and also Anatel, etc., for the different countries. For Animal X, this is an additional topics. We have the IECX and ATEX for international and Europe, but not the HASLOC for the US. So glad to follow up separately, Frank, to connect you to our team who might be interested in support in our international efforts. It's a lot of work, and yes, we're also partnering with other companies like yourselves and others in making sure our robots can be used safely around the globe.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We have a question from R. Kumar. Is the focus more on product, in brackets, robots and its technological enhancements, or SA solutions for customer acquisitions? How do you focus on both aspects in the business? Isn't it beneficial to focus only on one aspect to capture the market?
Excellent question. If I understand it right, and then I'll let Enzo also speak to it. As a tech company, there's always two pulling forces. One is the immediate market requirement. What problem are you solving? How can you solve it better? How can you charge essentially more for your product as well? That's big part of the stream that you're doing. At the same time, if you lose sight, where's technology, where's the market going within the next years? You don't see that from the immediate customer interactions, and you don't want to be suddenly overawed with the new technology. So we have a dedicated team, and certain part of our budgets and resources flow into these longer-term tech investments. And naturally, you have to balance the two. It is a struggle constantly, right, to judge left or right. How do we make the balance? But it's ultimately, as a deep tech company in a world that moves very quickly, we definitely have to do both. Enzo, anything to add from yours?
Nothing to add.
Did this answer your question, Kumar? Yes, it did. All right. So I have a couple more questions. So Enzo, you talked about your playbook, your, getting feedback. And how long does it take, or how long did it take you to get to your playbook? How long did that cycle to actually do that take you? And also, how do you to improve the product, or how do you prioritize the different? I'm sure there is plenty of things that users would like to change. How do you prioritize that and say, okay, this is more important? Is it like upvoting, or how do you prioritize the customer feedback for new features?
Let me start with kind of the value or the ROI playbook. We spent, probably since I joined, I remember the first board meeting we had at 2.5 years ago was like, okay, we need to get such an ROI playbook. That's super important for the scale up phase, and we agreed all on that, and then we got started. It took us probably about 2 years now to really finalize the complete playbook, which is not only the calculator, but it has all the use cases, it has a lot of details in it, it has examples in it, it has sales enablement material in it. How do you actually use it? How do you explain it to the customer? What do you need from customer to make it work? And how does a customer actually work with those kind of things? So it's much more than just, a handful of slides. We had the slides fairly early. It took a lot of effort, a lot of discussions, and a lot of iterations, because you learn something, then you apply it, then you talk to more customers, you learn something new, and then you go back and you kind of update your playbook. So kind of our version 1.0 in a way that, went through a lot of iterations. That probably took, I don't know, 1.5 years, 2 years. Could have been faster, but I think we just never really got to the point where internally we said, now it's version 1.0. It was always still kind of, a beta version of it. Regards to your second question is more, how do you manage your product roadmap and how do you make it customer centric? And especially when you develop something very innovative and very new, there's a lot of feedback from the market, because there's so many different kind of ideas what such a new technology could do, because people just get very creative. The core for that is, especially as a young company, is that you make sure you take the feedback very serious, B, you ask follow-up questions, you really need to understand what it is. It's not just, can it do this? It should be able to do this, but why should it be able to do that? What would it mean for you? And you really start to connect it to that ROI playbook in a way. You know, what additional value would it generate for you customer if we would add such a feature? Because if it doesn't generate more value, then it's probably also not the right thing to invest in. And that can be more applications, can be easier to use, more integrations. There's many different dimensions on where you can make it easier for customers to generate more value or to shorten the time to value. But there's a lot of product management kind of discovery going into early feedback, classifying it, then also putting an internal and a customer value to it, and then using that in internal road mapping discussions and figuring out, you know, what are we going to prioritize our resources to build in the next quarter, in the next 6 or 12 months to get to solving more use cases for the customers.
We're almost at 1 o'clock. I have one more question, and this one is for Peter. Peter, I've told you, I really admire you for you know, transferring this role from researcher into a CEO of such a big company. And I think you're doing an exceptional job. And so as the SSA, I see a lot of entrepreneurs struggling, and it's like, what advice would you give researchers or entrepreneurs looking to follow a similar path? And what are the key lessons learned from your entrepreneur journey that you could share?
Sure, a lot. Obviously, it's a lot of work goes into transforming your education into a different perspective. Maybe 3 things I want to mention. Number 1, you need to hire very complementary and the best people who have done other things than you did. So I think Enzo is a prime example here. These people bring in a fantastic power, knowledge, and experience, and you have to, you build up a great relationship and trust with them. So this propels you massively forward. Maybe the second topic is be very open-minded, right? The things that you believe are right from an academic approach is not what reality is. You have to trust a lot to your gut, but take feedback very serious and have a constant growth mindset. My role changes not only every year, probably every 3 to 6 months. And so you need to be at pace and getting all the external signals. How do you do that? Maybe that's point number 3 is, different people learn differently. I work a lot with books and exchanges from other more experienced people, just taking the problem that you have right now, bringing it on, learning, connecting the dots, and then very quickly implementing that. And then that's a cycle you can go on. It takes a lot of time. This is not a 40-hour-a-week job, but if you're up for the challenge, it's very rewarding.
I think these are perfect final words for this webinar. Thank you so much for doing this for us and with us. Really enjoyed the session, lots of learnings, and thanks to everyone for participating in this session. That was it's great to have you, and I look forward to seeing everyone hopefully soon in another webinar, and also Enzo to hear more of your learnings on the 18th of April. Thank you so much, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Regula. That was great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Talk soon.